This video is brought to you by no one, because I don't have any sponsors.
Now I know what you're thinking. What is a pyramid tier list? How does it work? Did you invent it? Why are you so smart and good looking? All very good questions. Firstly, it's all natural, God-given. Secondly, I kind of stole the idea from history textbooks at school, you know, the feudal Europe class pyramid, the Indian class system, or the ancient Egypt class system, or the food pyramid, I guess. Thirdly, it's a tier list, but in the shape of a pyramid, obviously. And lastly, how does it work? Well, just like the other tier lists and pyramids, at the bottom is dog and at the top is the best. Now, there's no particular ranking within the tiers of the pyramid. For example, if A, B, and C are in this tier, you in the comments can talk about which is better. If you want to say C is better than A, go for it. They're all pretty much the same in their quality. If you want to say, actually, C is better than D, which is all the way up in this tier, you need to go to rehab because you are smoking crack. Now, as you can clearly see in the title, I am ranking every MCU film that is currently released as of writing, recording, and editing this video. I'm only doing the films because 34 movies is enough, and I'm not about to watch 50 more hours of dog shit TV that's just gonna end up down here anyways. But now is the moment you've all been waiting for, the definitive MCU Pyramid tier list. And we'll start just like the ancient Egyptians did, and we'll start at the bottom. And I mean at the very bottom. I know I said there wasn't a real ranking in the list except for the top since there's only one up there, but I thought I should say the worst movie, and that's The Incredible Hulk. This movie is so fucking bad. It's an actual dumpster fire. The action is bad. They somehow spend the entire movie explaining the plot but don't fully explain it. I'm not sure if Bruce is just poorly written or Edward Norton is giving a terrible performance. I'm sure it's a bit of both, actually. The pacing is awful. It's slow and boring, setting everything up. And then it gets to the final fight that doesn't really feel like a final fight, and then it just kind of ends. I also feel like there was too much shit that happened before the story that they need to explain, but they don't do a good job of explaining it at all. Then there's the fight scene in the park, which overall it's fine, I guess. But then the ending happens where we need this big emotional moment, so it just starts fucking randomly raining even though it was sunny like a minute beforehand. How did that even happen? How did that get okayed? This movie is a goddamn mess, but it does have Liv Tyler, so that gives it some bonus points. Next in the shit tier, we have Ant-Man Quantumania. I had the unfortunate pleasure of watching this movie in theaters, and it might be the worst theater experience I've ever had. And I watched The Rise of Skywalker and Amsterdam in theaters. I hate this movie. I hate everything about it. Paul Rudd's Ant-Man is played out and kind of annoying at this point. The CGI is awful. The blue screening is offensively bad. I remember sitting in the theater and it got to the part with Bill Murray, which is at the end of the first act, about 30 minutes in, and I realized this movie was going to be complete dog shit. Just like in Hulk, I'm not sure if the performances are bad or the script is also bad. I mean, it's, again, probably both, because holy shit does everyone suck in this movie. But like, the whole cast can't be bad, especially when you've got some heavy fucking hitters here. Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Michelle Pfeiffer, Michael Douglas. I can't tell if they're all just phoning it in for a paycheck. I mean, Douglas and Pfeiffer definitely are. They cannot be fucked at all. It might be the director, but Peyton Reed did both the other Ant-Man movies, and while they're not exactly great, they're way better than this. And don't even get me started on Kang. Kang. Holy shit, did Marvel fuck up on this one. And I'm not talking about Jonathan Majors, even though he also fucking sucks in this movie. And I'm not talking about any of his drama because I'm not touching that. I mean, Kang as a character. Why would they introduce the next big bad villain, the one who is replacing Thanos, with this wet sock of a character? He's supposedly killed countless amounts of Avengers.
You're an Avenger. Have I killed you before?
What?
They all blur together after a while.
But he loses to fucking Ant-Man, and he's supposed to be a big threat after that. I mean, I know it's like all the different versions of him, but he still lost to fucking Ant-Man. Ant-Man. This next one is probably the one that I dreaded rewatching the most because it had been so long since I'd seen it, and most people talk about it like it's the worst thing ever made. That is, of course, Thor: The Dark World. Now, it's not as bad as people say. It's not good, like at all, but it's not the affront to cinema like most people would have you believe it is. It is really fucking boring though. The script is also really bad. It's just prime bad Marvel movie. I do like the final battle though, jumping throughout the worlds, probably just because it's the only interesting part of the movie and the rest is so fucking boring. I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's boring and uninteresting. I can barely remember what happened in the movie and I just watched it. But that brings me nicely to the next movie in the shit tier, Thor 4 More Thor, or Love and Thunder if you're a fucking fed. When I was watching all of the movies, I was taking notes so I would know what to say, and one of my notes for Thor 4 was just Jane in all caps.
Jane?
I'm not sure if any other MCU movie pissed me off as much as Love and Thunder did. Sure, Hulk made me mad, but that was more about it being a complete mess. Like, how did that get okayed? Love and Thunder pisses me off because it's so goddamn annoying. And the plot is fucking stupid too. Also, what the fuck is going on with the weapons? Why was this joke included more than once? Why is it going on throughout the movie? It's like a plot point. Also, why are the axe and the hammer sentient now? Another thing that pisses me off is the plot about them being gods because, you know, the one thing that Odin had been saying in the other two movies is that they're not gods. It's basically the plot of the entire first movie. But nope, now they're full-on gods while being no different. And I say they, but I just mean Thor because no one else in the group is. And while we're at it, let's just fuck up Thor's arc from the last movie even more because why not? I mean, Infinity War already fucked it up, so why not just piss on its grave? The rest of the plot is fine, I guess. Christian Bale's character is pretty bad, but I blame the script for that. Or should I say the lack of one because it's a complete fucking mess. It seems like Marvel said Ragnarok was good and it was a big hit, so let's just throw more Taika Waititi at it and it should be good. Now, I will say I'm a big fan of Taika, but this is like someone trying to copy his style and just fucking it up at every point. The movie is never allowed to be serious except for the very beginning and a little bit at the end. Otherwise, it's just a stupid joke after stupid joke after stupid joke. It's wacky and crazy like Ragnarok, but it has none of Ragnarok's charm and somehow causes there to be no chemistry within the cast, which is actually impressive because that was one of the strongest parts of the Thor movies. Thor and Jane, that was the fucking glue that held those movies together, and now it's gone. Thor and Jane, there's nothing there anymore. And I know it kind of makes sense within the movie that their chemistry is shit, but doesn't make it any less shit. I might as well just continue on the Thor train because next we have Thor, the first one. Overall, it's just pretty Like, it's not good, but it's not that bad. It's just a cookie cutter bland Marvel movie. Sir Kenneth Branagh tries to bring a little something to it, but it's not enough to change it because at its core, it's still not good. It's too Shakespeare and gaudy for a comic book movie, and he brings in the Dutch angles, and I fucking hate Dutch angles. The plot is all over the place, trying to balance the Earth stuff with the Asgard stuff. Like, it kind of has two different climaxes, one for the Earth plot where he gets the hammer back and beats the big robot thing, and then there's one for the Asgard plot where he confronts Loki, but that just fucks with the pacing. I don't have much else to say, really. I mean, it does have Anthony Hopkins, so that gives it a bunch of bonus points. Moving along, next we have Captain Marvel, and I don't have much to say about it, honestly. It's just really bland and boring. It's not bad in any interesting way, it's just so boring and forgettable. It's just shot, reverse shot. Brie Larson is a plank of wood, but a plank of wood might actually be better, so there's that. But then again, the script isn't doing her any favors, so it's just a wombo combo of dog shit. She's bland, everyone else is bland, I don't don't care about any of them. Who fucking cares about these people? The CGI is bad. De-aged Samuel L. Jackson looks bad. So does Phil. Also, why is he even in it? Fan service, probably. Anyways, we're moving on to the next one. Which now forces me to talk about the sequel. Is it actually the sequel? I think so. I'm talking about The Marvels, which is as bland as the last one. Well, that's not entirely true. The first fight scene is actually pretty solid. I like them swapping around, and it's actually shot pretty well. There are a couple moments where it's not just standard Marvel slop, and I did appreciate that. It's like they gave the director a little room to have style, but just a little bit, just a little touch. But the rest of the movie is so goddamn boring. It doesn't help that I don't give a fuck about any of these people, and I barely know who any of them are anyways. I've only seen 2 MCU shows, just these 2, and they were bad, so I do know who this is. But that also means I don't know who this is, and I can't be fucked to care about either of them. Captain Marvel as a character is just as bad in this one. The villain sucks. The whole singing part was dumb. I didn't like that. So was the cat part where they were eating everybody. What the fuck was going on there? It's better than Captain Marvel, but that's not saying much because a dog throwing up on the carpet is better than Captain Marvel. This next one hurts me a little bit to put it down here in the shit tier because the highs of this movie are so good, but the rest of the movie is just ass. I'm talking about Iron Man 2. It's rated very highly in my mind solely because of Sam Rockwell. I don't think about the rest of the movie, just his scenes, because they are perfect. It's a shame that the rest of the movie sucks shit. Like, if you take out the Justin Hammer scenes, it's easily one of the worst movies. Right there with the Hulk. It is that bad, but those scenes are just that good. The rest of the movie is trying to do a lot, setting up the MCU for the first Avengers movie, and it does most of the heavy lifting for that. It's also trying to tell a good sequel story, which it doesn't. I mean, it's alright, I guess, and the bad guy is atrociously bad. Mickey Rourke is awful in this movie. What the fuck is going on with that accent, first of all?
Okay. Do you speak English?
The stuff with S.H.I.E.L.D. is fine, I guess. It feels kind of forced and jammed in there, but so does everything else in the movie. The next movie doesn't get any introduction because it's not good. It's Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't have much to say about it. It's better than Quantumania, but everything basically is. It's not as good as the first one because Edgar Wright had nothing to do with it, and you can tell it's just not as fun. The villain is also maybe the most forgettable out of the entire MCU, but thank God that she's going to be in the Thunderbolts. Can't wait for that shit show of a movie to ruin all the good characters left. Actually, none of them are in that movie. Poor Bucky. But this movie, just like Iron Man 2, does have a silver lining. Ant-Man and the Wasp has Walter Goggins, but I'll be honest, it's not his best work. But I blame the material he was given because any good craftsman blames his tools and not himself. He is, however, the best part of the movie. This next movie also doesn't get an introduction. It's The Eternals. This movie is so goddamn boring. I don't give a fuck about any of these characters. In fact, I was actively rooting for Richard Madden's character to win, just because I like him as an actor, not because I like him as a character or his performance, because god damn is it not good. But he's not alone in that because everyone else in the movie was also not good. How can you have a movie where a bunch of the main cast are killed, but it also somehow feels like nothing is happening? If you asked me to explain what happens in the movie, I don't think I could tell you anything besides the ending. And this guy. Fuck this guy. Fuck his whole character. For those of you who don't know, the Eternals were sent to Earth to kill some monsters and guide humanity to becoming advanced, and this guy is responsible for helping invent new technology. That's his whole purpose. Then he helped America create the first nuclear weapons, and then was also somehow in Japan when they dropped them. Like he was working in the Manhattan Project and then just went over to Japan somehow. Not important. But he sees the result of the bombing and then he gives up on humanity. But he knew he was making a bomb and then got upset when the bomb was used. Annoyed the shit out of me. The one positive I will say about the movie though is that the CGI looked pretty good. The shots of the Celestial coming out of the Earth look pretty fucking cool, but that's the only positive I have to say about the movie. The next movie, I do have more positives to say about it. I mean, not much more, but it is still more. Black Panther 2, or Black Panther Wakanda Forever. This movie, just like the Eternals, is so fucking boring. The bad guys suck. Oh no, evil water people. Oh no. And the main bad guy looks fucking stupid with his little wings on his feet. Looks stupid as fuck. I hate it. The Wakandans have vibranium. So do the sea people. The Wakandans have a super serum plant. So do the sea people. I just don't fucking care about any of it. I was so bored watching this shit. And it kind of hurts to say because I think from an objective standpoint, this is a better movie than the first one. The cinematography specifically, in some parts, are so fucking good. I say some parts because it is still a Marvel movie, but it has its moments. I would say that it's better, but I just can't be fucked to care about any of it. This random girl gets an Iron Man suit. Who cares? Shuri is the new Black Panther. Cool, I guess. I don't give a fuck. Then the thing that sent me over the fucking wall is the end credits scene. Why the fuck would you reveal that T'Challa had a son in the end credits of the movie?
My name is Prince T'Challa, son of King T'Challa.
Just end the movie that way. I get it, the ending is all artsy and whatnot with the crying and the acceptance and then the end. I like it. I'm a fan. But not when you have basically the same fucking ending with even more of an emotional moment literally in the credits 5 minutes later. We finally made it to the last movie in the shit tier, Black Widow. Why was this movie made? What was the point? Was it to set up half the cast for the Thunderbolts? Because that's the only reason I can think of. I'll be honest, I'll be the brave one and say it. Black Widow did not need her own standalone movie, especially after she dies in Endgame. Granted, I know the plan was for it to come out before Endgame, but that didn't happen, so why do it after Endgame when it really wasn't necessary, especially when it's a prequel, kind of. It's set up to be in between Civil War and Infinity War, 4 years after it should have happened. But since it's a prequel, kinda, it's got no fucking stakes whatsoever. Even less than a typical Marvel movie, which doesn't have any to begin with. And you would think that a movie about a bunch of spies would be a spy thriller type movie, but nope, why would they do that when it can be a normal Marvel action movie about a bunch of people who don't have any superpowers? The final battle is dumb, it's not good at all. Fighting on a floating base with all the shit that happens, especially when Black Widow is just a regular person. She doesn't have any powers. She's literally Gwen Stefani. She's just a girl.
I'm just a girl.
The only one who has powers is Jim from Stranger Things, and don't even get me started on him. The more I think about it, the less I like the movie, so I'm just gonna move on. I've decided to name this tier the okay tier because all the movies are okay. They're alright. Not that good, but better than anything down here. What you're going to notice about this tier is that they are all pretty much the same, in the sense that they're all just boring Marvel movies, the standard slop that they make. I know I said that about a bunch of the movies in the shit tier, but they also had other things to bring them down. These don't usually have that. The first movie is the textbook definition of this, Doctor Strange. There is nothing to say about it. It doesn't make me angry, I don't care about any of it, and maybe that means it's one of the worst since it didn't elicit an emotional response. I mean, it's not, but there's something to that line of thinking. Anyways, the movie, the CGI is iffy at best. Some parts look good, other parts look like shit. The fight in the mirror dimension is cool. The villain, on the other hand, is really bad. Everything else is just pretty mid, not much to say about it. This next one surprised me with how high it ranked because I was expecting it to go down here in the shit tier, but nope, it squeaked its way up here. I'm talking about Avengers Age of Ultron. Most people in their rankings have this near the bottom, and I guess it's near the bottom of mine too. kinda, but I was expecting it at the very bottom. And it's not actually that bad. It's not that good, hence why it's here, but I think it gets a bad overall rap. Maybe it's just because when I watched it, I was in a good mood, or because the parts I really like. James Spader completely steals the movie. He is the best part about it. I also like the party scene and them picking up the hammer, or trying to. The highway fight scene is also pretty good. The best fight scene in the movie. Everything else is just pretty It's alright. The CGI doesn't look that good. Not that bad. The movie is definitely trying to do too much, trying to set everything up for phase 3. But other than that, it's alright. It's fine, which is why it's here in this tier. I'm definitely going to get some hate for this next one. It's the hottest take in the whole pyramid. Black Panther. This goddamn movie is so fucking overrated. It blows my mind. When I was looking at other people's lists, Black Panther routinely ranked in the top 5. Some people even had it number 1. And let me tell you, that is some horse shit. A lot of them said the same thing about it, saying that Black Panther, unlike other Marvel movies, had a strong message and stood for something. But that's just not true at all, because Black Panther, just like every single Marvel movie since Iron Man 1, has the exact same message. If you have the power and the means to help people, then you should. It's literally Tony's character arc from the first MCU movie. Fuck, we even had Uncle Ben saying it back in 2002.
With great power comes great responsibility.
But maybe it's just because the villain challenged the hero's thinking, and to be fair, that rarely happens in a Marvel movie. But I'd counter that with the fact that Michael B. Jordan isn't that good in the movie. He's trying to be serious and intimidating, but it comes off as over the top and campy.
What's up?
Granted, the dialogue isn't helping him. I mean, how would anyone say this?
I found my daddy with Panther claws in his chest.
Another thing a lot of people talked about was the importance of Black Panther within Hollywood. And I get it. I understand the representation and having a black director with a mostly black cast being a huge blockbuster. I get it. I understand it. But that doesn't make the quality of the movie any better. The CGI is dog shit. The final battle is still bad. And as amazing as Chadwick Boseman is, I'll say it, T'Challa isn't that good of a character. He's just kind of there for most of the movie, but when the movie does need him, he shows up. Chadwick Boseman, not T'Challa. The scene where he confronts his dad in the afterlife, that's some good stuff right there. Also the part where he comes back.
I never yielded! And as you can see, I am not dead!
I am a big fan of that part. That's really the only positives I have to say about it. The rest of the movie is either bad or so it goes down here. Now, this may come as a shocker for this next one, but I don't have a lot to say about it. Ant-Man, it doesn't really try to be anything more than it is. It's just more Marvel slop, and it doesn't really try to be anything else. There are hints of it trying to do more, but I think that's just because Edgar Wright was originally going to direct and he wrote the original script. Granted, it was rewritten with a new director, but you can still feel his fingerprints in the movie. It's fun, it's quirky, where the other Ant-Man movies aren't. It's got some charm, not a lot, but it's got some. And I do love a good heist film. I mean, this isn't good, but it is still a heist film, so it gets a point or two. The CGI is fine. The action is alright, I guess. Overall, it's just pretty passable and mid. Not much else to say about it. Next, we have Spider-Man Far From Home. This might be low for some people. I have no clue what the general consensus is about it, but I'll say it. It's the worst MCU Spider-Man movie. A lot of the blue screen looks like shit. Nick Fury is so fucking annoying throughout, and I know it's not actually Nick Fury, but that doesn't make it any less annoying. Jake Gyllenhaal is pretty good. Obviously, it's Jake Gyllenhaal. The LSD scene is great. The CGI in that scene is really good. It's probably where all the budget went. The action throughout the movie is fine, I guess. It isn't amazing, but it's not that bad. The ending is really dumb. Like Peter saying execute the order or whatever he says.
Execute them all.
It doesn't really fit the way he or anyone else talks, and it's just there for the shock ending reveal. But Mysterio wouldn't need that anyways. He could just fake whatever he wanted with a couple of drones. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but why put it in like that? It just bugs me. Another thing that bugs me is that Ned's actor looks so fucking old. He's supposed to be 16 and he looks like he's nearing 30. This one bugs me a lot more. I fucking hate it. I didn't see this next one when it came out. The first time I watched it was when I rewatched everything, and I was a little nervous because I had only heard bad things about it. I am, of course, talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. This movie was pleasantly surprising because I was expecting it to be really bad like Captain Marvel or The Eternals, but it's not that bad. I mean, the entire premise is pretty fucking stupid, and the fact that this is basically a Wanda or Scarlet Witch movie is kind of weird since, you know, it's a Doctor Strange movie. I mean, it's right there on the poster. That's not really a huge deal. It's just kind of annoying. When I watched the movies, I did so in order of release. So Iron Man, then Hulk, so on and so forth. And I don't think any other movie benefited more from this than Doctor Strange 2. Because let me tell you, watching the post-Endgame shit was fucking rough. I'll be honest, some of those movies are alright, but they are all pretty much the same boring movie visually. They're just cookie cutter Marvel. And going from Eternals to a Sam Raimi movie is like going from kindergarten to Vietnam. I know it's not a proper Sam Raimi movie because he's still shackled by Marvel, but it's still a metric fuck ton better than what they were doing before. And that's probably why I think so highly of it, because it was so refreshing to watch. Everything else about it is just okay, but it is enough to save it from the shit tier. We've reached the last movie in the OK tier, which is Iron Man 3, the big finale of the Iron Man trilogy. And I've gotta say, it's a bit underrated, not by much though. I remember when it came out, a bunch of people were upset with the Mandarin twist, big quotation marks there, but I don't have a problem with it. I actually was a big fan of Ben Kingsley as Trevor. Iron Man 2 had Sam Rockwell, and now Iron Man 3 gets Ben Kingsley. Great side characters. The villain, or Guy Pearce, was alright, but that's more about the character than about his performance. I just think he's boring. I don't like his superpowers either, and I'm not really sure why. There's just something about it. I am, however, a big fan of the ending fight with Tony jumping between all the suits. I think it's a good action set piece, but I understand why other people are not a fan. Just a bunch of robot Iron Man suits fighting. I can see how you don't like it. However, something that can't be argued is that scene where Tony has to beat the bad guy without his suit, and he shows off his smarts to do it. It's different, unique, which gives it some nice bonus points. What else is there in this movie? Oh, the part with the kid, whatever his name is, I like it. Him and Tony have some good chemistry. Overall, the movie as a whole isn't terrible. It should get more respect, but only a little bit. We have left the OK tier, and now we're on the doorstep of the good tier. These movies are good, I know, surprising. They're nothing amazing, but they're not too bad. Just a solid movie overall. The first movie in the good tier is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It's alright, isn't it? The MCU has the same problem as a lot of long-running TV shows. The executives at the top want it to keep going because it's popular and makes a ton of money, but after a while, all the people that actually make it want to work on new and other things, so they leave, be it actors, writers, directors, whoever. It also gets worse and worse as it goes along. But the gravy train has to keep going, so they bring in new characters to try and spice it up. But just like in those TV shows, it's not as good, and I just don't care about the new characters. I started watching the MCU because of Captain America and Iron Man, and now we've got whoever the fuck this is. It seriously took me a second to remember his name, and it's in the title of the fucking movie. And adding characters to the universe after the big climax that they've spent 10 years making doesn't really help. Now, this isn't unique to Shang-Chi. Any new movie after Endgame has this same problem, but I feel like it's worse here because at least the other movies are bad, so them getting forgotten makes sense. But Shang-Chi is a solid movie that happened to be made after people started to not care anymore. Now, I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with Shang-Chi? It fits into some of the problems with the MCU, but I mostly wanted to rant about why the MCU is failing lately, and I don't have a lot to say about Shang-Chi, so I fit it into here. The movie is alright, the CGI isn't very good, the story is fine, some of the action scenes are pretty good, the big final battle was really dumb. Why not just have him fight his dad? That would work fine. Why does it have to be a big CGI battle to save the world? What is the point? And why the fuck is Awkwafina in it? I'm sure that she's a lovely person in real life, but holy fuck, do I hate it every single time she's in a movie. Other than that, it's alright. Next, we have Spider-Man No Way Home. I've realized that a lot of people online don't like this movie, which is weird because when it came out, I feel like most people thought it was pretty good, but now that's changed for some reason. Most people seem to say that they don't like the fan service, all the shit that has to do with the other Spider-Man movies and the multiverse stuff. Personally, I don't mind it. I'm a fan, actually. I think one movie kind of celebrating all the other Spider-Man movies is fine. Spider-Man 2 on its own deserves some celebration. I also like the Peters interacting with each other. It just works for me. The reason I don't like this movie is because of the ending. Resetting Peter to basically being the normal broke Spider-Man that we've literally had twice of already, with both being in this very movie. I like MCU Spider-Man because of Tom Holland, yes, but also because of his relationship with Tony and all that. I know that Tony's dead now, but him interacting with the other heroes and having all the Stark tech is really cool. I don't want another broke boy Peter working at the Daily fucking Bugle, especially when the reason that it's happening is so fucking dumb. A toddler could have come up with a better reason than Doctor Strange, the master of the mystic arts, basically fucking up a spell, or Peter, the boy genius, fucking up the wording of that spell. Also, the whole premise being that everyone just believes Mysterio and not the actual Avenger is a bit crazy, but the fact that Peter does everything he does so he can get into college. I know it's for MJ and Ned, but like Strange said,
that you didn't even think to plead your case with them first before you asked me to brainwash the entire world?
Now we have, as of the making of this video, the newest entry into the MCU, Deadpool and Wolverine, which is also a controversial movie, something that I don't really get. They say the plot is pretty bad, but that's not really a problem. I mean, sure, it's not as good as 1 or 2, but it's just more Deadpool, and I'm not really sure why anyone was expecting anything different, but adding Wolverine as the straight man works really well, and I just enjoy it. Adding some of the old Fox characters was a nice touch, and Chris Evans as Johnny Storm was also a nice little treat. The action is pretty solid, the CGI is alright. One thing that I don't like is how it turned Wade into this weird loser. I mean, sure, it's different and unique, but it's also a weird direction to go with the character. I do want to talk about my favorite scene in the movie because I don't think anyone else has really talked about it. Granted, I haven't looked anywhere, so maybe someone has. I am, of course, talking about the van scene and the fight that happens afterwards. Wolverine ripping into Deadpool was pretty great, and the part where he says,
No wonder the Avengers didn't take you, or the X-Men. They'll take fucking anyone.
He's talking about himself. Oh, great writing. And then the fight scene is also pretty good. The one thing that I really don't like about the movie is the amount of licensed music. I'm not saying that licensed music shouldn't be in the movie, but I'm just saying that not every scene needs a different song. Like, give me 2, maybe 3 max, and that's it. It gets to a point where it's obvious and annoying and taking away from the moments. But I do fuck with Like a Prayer, so you gotta take the good with the bad. Overall, it's just more Deadpool, which I think everyone wanted. Next, we have the finale, the conclusion of the second best trilogy in the MCU. I am, of course, talking about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. While it is pretty good because it's a James Gunn movie, it does kind of feel like he's phoning it in and he's checked out. By this point, he had already started his dealings with the DCU and had already done the Suicide Squad, so this kind of felt more like an obligation than something he really wanted to do. Of course, I could be wrong, but that's just what it feels like when I'm watching the movie. I'm also not a huge fan of the ending. I'm not really sure why, because it wraps up the story and the characters pretty well, but there's just something that I don't like about it. Peter going back to Earth and spending time with his grandpa, Gamora being a pirate, Drax and Nebula taking care of the kids, and Rocket and Groot with the other people continuing on the Guardians just feels weird for some reason. It's also a weird choice to make the central theme of your movie animal abuse in your fun action comic book movie. It's kind of a downer, if I'm being honest. What about the rest of the movie? The action is alright, it's not anything special and not terrible. The CGI is good. I liked Adam Warlock, he was pretty good in it. Everyone was pretty good in it. But there is something about Chris Pratt's performance that I don't like, and I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's just the character and he's doing a good job. I don't know. There's just something I don't like about it. Kinda like this whole movie. We might as well talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as the next movie. I think both 2 and 3 are about the same in quality. Personally, I have 2 ranked a little bit higher, but that's just because of Kurt Russell, and I do love Kurt Russell. I'm a big Kurt Russell guy. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. The action is good. I do think the CGI in 3 is a little better, but it's fine in 2. I'm a big fan of Rocket's arc because it's really the only one in the movie, and like I said, I'm a fan of Rocket. Peter being half god is a little out of left field, personally. I don't know if that's what happens in the comics, but I also don't care. Michael Rooker as Yondu is pretty amazing, and his death is great. I shouldn't say that Rocket has the only arc in the movie because Yondu and Peter have one as well, but Yondu's is basically the same as Rocket's, and Peter is just learning to accept that Yondu cared about him, which I don't think is as good. But Yondu's backstory of getting kicked out of the Ravagers due to dealing in child slavery kind of reminds me of Jack Sparrow being branded as a pirate because he wouldn't deal in slaves. And as much as I love that scene between Yondu and Sylvester Stallone, it is a bit of an exposition dump to set up Yondu's death and the fireworks, but other than that, I'm a fan of the movie. We have reached the final movie in the good tier, which is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is the best Spider-Man movie. I know the third Spider-Man movie is also up here in the good tier, but I correctly think that the first one is just better. I think the story is better. The story is 100% better, actually. I like that Tony's in it. The relationship between Tony and Peter is amazing. Peter being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man really works in his first movie. The lack of an origin story is good because we've gotten it twice in the last 20 years, which is also why we don't need a regular broke Peter. Sorry, I still don't like the ending of the third one. Michael Keaton is great as the Vulture. Big Michael Keaton guy here too. The high school characters can actually pass as high schoolers, which is something the other ones can't really say. The scene where Tony confronts Peter after the ferry incident is amazing. Probably the best scene in the movie. The action is alright. The CGI is fine. One thing that is wasted is Donald Glover in the movie as Aaron Davis / the Prowler. I know it was just to give a little hint towards Miles, but ever since that, the MCU has completely forgotten about it and nothing has been done with it. But other than that, it's a good movie overall. This next tier is the pretty good tier. This is when it starts to get serious. First up, we have maybe the most important movie in the MCU, a movie that has changed Hollywood for better or for worse, depending on who you're asking. I am, of course, talking about the first Avengers movie. I think that the movie overall is pretty good. Nothing crazy, but for what it's trying to do, it did it pretty well. And it is extremely important, so that gave it some bonus points in the rankings. One thing that I don't like about it is Joss Whedon's characterization of the characters. They're all just basically one note and have one defining characteristic that's just used throughout the movie. There's also no character arcs and no growth from anybody, which is fine, I guess, due to the fact that that's what their other movies are for, and this is just the big team-up movie. But when you're getting this high in the rankings, that shit matters. Tom Hiddleston steals the show, obviously. Everyone knows that. He and this performance is the sole reason why Loki is in the MCU still, and why he's so beloved, because he was alright in the first Thor movie, but in the Avengers, he is the star. Other than that, it's all good. The action's decent, the CGI is fine, the story is also fine, but it all comes together to create a very good movie, and it's the reason the MCU is still around. This next movie might be the most controversial placement. Well, the second most after Black Panther, and no, I won't apologize for that. I'm talking about Captain America: The First Avenger, and I love this movie. It is probably my second favorite movie, and we'll get to number one. While I was watching and ranking all of the movies, I kept thinking there's no reason why I have to put this so low when it's better than most of the other movies. Legitimately, it has maybe the best first act of any MCU movie, and the second act is almost just as good. It's definitely the most underrated movie in the MCU. Where it really starts to fall off is the third act because the action isn't good and they haven't really figured out how to do that yet, so it's kind of trash, which is also the biggest reason why it gets dragged down here into the pretty good tier and not any higher. It's no secret that Captain America is my favorite Avenger, and this movie is probably the sole reason for that, because when I watched this when I was younger, I loved it. Steve and Peggy's relationship throughout the movie is so good. It's so good, in fact, that wrapping up that storyline was the last scene in one of the biggest movies of all time. It's even got Hugo Weaving in it, who's amazing. Not in this particular movie, I just mean in general. And it's got Neil McDonough, which longtime viewers know I'm a big fan of.
Neil McDonough, he's like one of my favorite actors that's not really a big name. I like him.
He's a righteous dude.
The cast is great, the story's great, the action could use some work if I'm being honest. And I haven't even talked about the ending yet. Steve sacrificing himself and then waking up in Times Square. That is some good cinema right there.
Yeah, I had a date.
Since I just mentioned it, I might as well talk about it now. Avengers Endgame. I'm kind of torn about where to put Endgame, but I've decided to put it here because it's pretty good in terms of everything, but it's also not that amazing at anything. That's kind of why I struggled with where to put it, but I figured that it's trying to wrap up 10 years of storytelling and it does it pretty well, so that should give it some points. And there's nothing that I really hate about the movie. There's a lot of fan service, and I mean a lot, but I think it works due to the fact that they've built up a lot of equity within the past 10 years, so this one movie where they celebrate that is fine. It's a good follow-up to Infinity War. It wraps up Tony's story well. It wraps up Steve's story well. It also sets up Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I'm not going to talk about because I do not have enough time to rant about that piece of shit. It also sets up the Hawkeye series, which I haven't seen, and it wraps up Nat's story pretty well, at least I thought. The movie's trying to do a lot, so I gave it some bonus points because it didn't really fuck up anything. It had the emotional moments of killing off the major characters and ending the story for the others. It really feels like the end of the MCU, and many people could argue that it should have been. But at the end of the day, Steve got his dance, and that's all that really matters. I couldn't think of a good intro for this one, so we're just moving on. Guardians of the Galaxy. I remember when this came out, it was one of the moments that the MCU seemed unstoppable. Sure, they had some duds, Thor 2, I'm looking at you, but when they came out with this movie with a bunch of characters that only the comic book nerds knew about, and it's huge, and it's good, and everyone loves it, it seemed like the MCU could do no wrong. And the movie is pretty good. I'd say it's the best out of the entire trilogy. It was fresh, it was fun, it had a lot of charm and personality. There's a lot of chemistry in the cast, which really helps. It's got Batista, so that's a big dub right there. The plot is good. The CGI is fine. The action is good. The only bad thing about the movie is the villain, because he actually blows donkey dick. He is so bland and boring that it's fucking painful. If I'm being honest, that's probably the reason why it's not in the next tier up and it's down here. Besides that, I don't really have a lot to say that hasn't already been said. It's a really good movie, and I'm a fan. We're at the end of the pretty good tier, and with it, we're talking about the movie that got me into the MCU, Captain America: Civil War. Now, I had seen other MCU movies before this one came out, but I wasn't that big into the MCU. I didn't really care about it, and if I'm being honest, I thought it was a bit overrated. Actually, I still think that, but that's not the point. But when it was coming out, I saw some trailers, and I was getting excited, and I was in. Granted, after Endgame, I was back out, so it didn't last very long, but we're not talking about about that. We're talking about Civil War, and it's pretty good. And as I've established, Captain America is my favorite Avenger, so that gives it some bonus points. The action is really good. The CGI isn't terrible. I mean, Tony's suit looks like shit because it's 100% CGI and it's huge and bulky for some reason. And it's got Bucky, who's one of my favorite characters, and this is when he was still a badass, which is great. Black Panther is introduced to the MCU, which is good, I guess. It also introduces Spider-Man into the MCU, which would have been better if they didn't spoil it leading up to the release of the movie. The airport scene is cool, even though they're not fighting for 100% realsies. It's a little nitpick. Zemo as the antagonist is very good. So good that they had to bring him back for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which again, I'm not going to talk about. It also sets up the rest of Phase 3 pretty well, and the ending fight between Cap, Bucky, and Tony is still one of the best fight scenes in the MCU. We've reached the penultimate tier of the pyramid. To start off this tier, we might as well start off with the beginning of the MCU, Iron Man. God, this movie holds up so well. It's a good thing that this was the first MCU movie because you couldn't have started much better. It's also a great standalone movie because it doesn't have to force its way into the rest of the MCU because it is the MCU. It's so crisp and on point for basically everything. It's a great origin movie, and I know Marvel has struggled with that in the past. It also started Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback and redemption from his many demons. Well, this and Tropic Thunder that released a little after, the old Wombo combo. The plot is excellent. The CGI is great to this day. Seriously, it looks amazing. That shot where he blows up the tank is so good. Jeff Bridges is a treat, as always. The only real downside that I have to say is the fact that they do the whole villain is the same as the hero. Not great, but it kind of works here because it's bigger and Tony Stark made it in a cave.
With a box of scraps!
Everything else is amazing, which is why it's up here. Next, we have Avengers Infinity War, and it's this high mostly due to the fact that it has a lot to do, and it does it all pretty well. Bringing everyone together and then having Thanos show up and murk them all is great. The story is pretty good. There's nothing about it that stands out to me as being awful, but it's not crazy amazing. The action is solid as well, mostly. The fight on Titan is probably the highlight of the movie besides Josh Brolin as Thanos, because he is the star of the movie. If he isn't as good as he is, the movie doesn't work. And he looks pretty good in terms of CGI, which is more than I can say about the rest of the movie because, God, there are some parts that look terrible. I mean, look at this. Dog shit. Thanos winning and everyone dying works to make it feel like a big deal. Granted, didn't last very long. The fight in Wakanda, however, is just a mess. Two faceless CGI armies fighting, and there was a bunch of quipping in it that is just not necessary. And it kind of fucks with the tone that they're going for. And then there's the fact that they had to completely take out Wanda and Vision out of the plot because if they were both there fighting Thanos, you could make the argument that he wouldn't have won. So you have to take them out of the story so that he can win. Granted, that's not for certain, but that's just what it feels like. There's a reason that Wanda isn't in the battle until the very end. And then she's also holding off Thanos with one hand. I feel like I'm nitpicking this a lot, but a lot of people have this as the #1 MCU movie, so I'm gonna give reasons why it's not. And it has a lot of them. And the main reasons why it's good are just like the vibes, besides the overall movie making. There's also Tony and Peter with the Guardians. I like that. They work well together. Also, another thing that bugs me is why the fuck does Steve not have a shield? He is in Wakanda where vibranium is from. They could easily make him a replica of his shield or something even better, but instead he gets these stupid little dagger things that are not a shield. I do have to talk about the ending though, and by the ending I mean the credits, because those are so good. The music in the credits are so good. It sets this tone like you just fucked up. Then at the end, with the Avengers theme being played in minor, with the fucking title being dusted away, is So good. It's probably the highlight of the movie. The final movie in this tier is Thor Ragnarok. I love this movie. It is so good. It is the perfect amount of comedy and seriousness that Thor 4 fucked up. Thor's arc throughout the movie is amazing, though you could say that it's basically the same that he has in the first movie, where he realizes that he's more than just his hammer and that his powers come from him, but we're not going to nitpick that because it's done much better here. Hulk in the movie is also very fitting. That's because he's bouncing off Chris Hemsworth, who's got some great comedic timing. Wonder where it went. Tom Hiddleston is amazing. He's got Loki down by this point. Cate Blanchett is always a treat, just like Jeff Bridges. Something I do like, though, is Carl Urban as whoever the fuck he is I don't remember his name, but I remember him in my heart. Taika Waititi as Korg is fine. I'm a big fan of him saying,
The revolution has begun.
that just tickles something inside of me. He doesn't really overstay his welcome like he does in Thor 4. And then there's Jeff Goldblum, who is there. I don't really have anything to say about that. I'm not exactly a big Jeff Goldblum guy, but I don't hate him in the movie. But I love this movie. It holds a special place in my heart. The Macho Man Randy Savage always said,
"The cream will rise to the top, oh yeah."
And this is the cream of the MCU. And it makes me want to cream. There's only one movie up here because it is objectively the best movie in the MCU. I don't do if, buts, or maybes.
I do absolutes.
The best movie in the MCU is Captain America, The Winter Soldier, obviously. In my notes that I took for this movie, it just says, duh. And that's really all I need to say about it, if I'm being honest. It's got Steve, who is the best Avenger. It's got the best action in all of the MCU. It's got Bucky as prime Winter Soldier, which is the best version of Bucky. It introduces Sam as Falcon, which is alright, if I'm being honest. I'm not a big fan of him in general. Natasha's in this movie, and so is George St. Pierre. Those two things are not equal. It's got Robert Redford, who is known for spy thrillers, as the main antagonist, and Robert Redford is always amazing. Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury is in it, and he fits very well for the spy thriller that they're going for. He is the foil to Captain America and his ideas, but this movie is what made people realize that Captain America fucks. The highway fight scene, the elevator fight scene are the two best fight scenes in all of the MCU. I fucking love the elevator scene. It is one of the best scenes in the MCU, fight or not. Bucky is presented as a fucking badass in the movie, and when he takes out Nick Fury and does that little sidestep thing, makes me fucking drip. I'm not a big fan of the ending turning into this big fight like most comic book movies, but it does have the climax of the movie, which is one of the best in the MCU. I don't really give a fuck about what's going on with Natasha and Nick Fury and all that stuff over there. I'm talking about the fight between Steve and Bucky. Him fighting Bucky to insert the chip, and then after he does, he gives up because he's trying to get Bucky to remember who he is. It brings a tear to my eye just talking about it now. And Steve telling Bucky to finish it because he's with him to the end of the line makes my heart melt. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. It's my favorite MCU movie. It's the best MCU movie, and it's one of the best comic book movies of all time. And that's it. This is my ranking for the MCU, and this has been the definitive MCU Pyramid tier list. If you are still watching, first of all, thank you. It means a lot. Maybe consider subscribing if you haven't already and liking the video. Also consider leaving a comment down below talking about how your favorite movie should have been higher. I'm sure everyone in the comments will agree with you. Other than that, thank you for watching. I'll try to get my next video out within the next 6 months.